So we had looked at the Lamarckism yesterday. One thing that I realized that we kind of jumbled up between Darwinism, and that was one of the question Pratham you had asked, was like how is it different than the process of natural selection. So when I was going through it, I realized that maybe I did a mistake or it was an assumption, I don't know. But the emphasis of Lamarckism is more on the internal vital force, because I just went through the document of Lamarckism. It mentions of so there is something called as internal vital force. They don't really mention of what that force is, especially this guy.
So is it something like willpower? So
Not will.
If you want to eat like leaves from tall trees, you kind of wish and make an effort that your neck will grow taller, and it actually does.
So that is what we don't know what that assumption was, but it speaks of that internal vital force in throughout the Lamarckism, and that is what led to this like quite a lot of features which exist. And this is not the willpower also. I suppose it's more of the cellular internal changes that keeps on happening throughout the cells within the organism. So that's what it must be talking of. So that was one of the major drastic difference between Lamarckism and Darwinism. So I guess now the distinction of question how they are different, I hope that is understood. So yes,
but like since we don't know what, like you said that it could be the cell functions, the internal vital force, and like even in natural selection, like I mean, in the end, everything goes back to the cell, right?
Yes, correct.
So if internal vital force, then it's just another name for the same change.
Correct, but that's when these theories they fail to explain certain aspect of what they are proposing.
So they didn't exactly say what the internal vital force was.
Not really.
So they only said it's something there in the body.
They just mentioned due to the internal vital force. They did not mention of something is there in the body or not there in the body.
Okay. So
that's my assumption of extrapolating that word internal vital force, because there is, I don't think there will be anything else apart from that in terms of assumption. So that's why. Okay, so let's continue with the second theory, and like I said, this is again not a part of the syllabus, but when we talk of neo-Darwinism, we need to have a basic understanding of what Darwinism is. So this part, basically, one thing that we tend to forget, that this theory of evolution or theory of natural selection was jointly proposed by this guy called as Wallace, Alfred Russel Wallace, and Darwin along with Wallace. They arrive at the same conclusions of the theories independently, and then later on they announce this theory of natural selection. Again, we always call it Darwin's theory, but that's also has quite a lot of contribution from this Wallace fellow. So this story that we know of, that Darwin was traveling around the world, and he traveled from 1831 almost for 5 years to mainlands of this southern part, like from South America to even to the Australia part, and then including some of the islands that we know. One of them we know of is Galapagos Islands. So Darwin collected different samples in terms of fossils, or he observed different flora and fauna information in terms of animals as well as plants, and he tried to write down the similarities and differences between them, and that's what he published his observation in his book called as Naturalist Voyage Around the World. I guess this book still exists. One of the book that I had recently downloaded and I wanted to share it with you is somewhere here. I don't know, I forgot where it is, but I have it somewhere. I shall share it with you, because that book mentioned quite a lot of interesting fact, and you can actually read it as your leisure reading. Like I mentioned of that origin of species, something like that. So these books are easily and freely available online, especially on that Google Books part. So and in these Darwin's observation, he uh, identified that different islands, they have similar climate and topography, but have different sorry different islands, they can have similar climate and topography, but they surely have different flora and fauna. And the assumption that goes with this is, like earlier they were a little closer compared to what they exist as of now. And that's when he is referring to that particular time point, that the similar climate and topography would have led to these organisms to be similar for that timing. And as the islands separated over the millions of years of time, they became these different flora and fauna, what they exist now. The plants and animals on the nearby islands, they are related, but they differ amongst themselves and those on the mainlands. So this was one of the very interesting observation that you made, because these islands, they are quite separated from the usual mainlands. They have drastic changes compared to their like structures and the functions amongst the those who are on the mainland.
So the first point, shouldn't it be different climate and topography?
Different climate currently, yes, but that's when it says similar and not the same. Now it is drastically different, right? And that is when I say the point he is referring to is from the perspective of the evolution and not just the current
So, but
observation.
that was his observations, right? So it's in
Yes.
Darwin's observation. So when he went to the island, he saw like maybe 5 different islands, and they had similar climate and topography. So they should have had similar flora and fauna. But if it was different, then the flora and fauna would have been different.
It's that is what exactly the next point speaks of. Even on that Galapagos Islands, he identified 13 species. Now, even being on the same island, what was the need of having 13 species developing simultaneously? That too of one particular species of finches, right?
So, but wasn't it like on many like different islands? Like maybe one island will have one type of finch, another island will have another type of finch. I mean, like if they are actually living on the same island, why would they evolve different? But if they were separated into different topological zones with different climates and topology, then they would evolve differently, right?
That's totally right. But then if even if you see the temperature difference or the environmental condition, they are not drastically different, and that is what he is referring to. They are similar. Even in terms of topography, it's which is, I guess, throughout it's very common, except we leave the extremes that is closer to poles. But most of the landscape, they are very much similar.
No, so like the mountains, the plains, the deserts, the marshes, even the soil. So like even the soil is very different, right? Some have red soil, some have black soil, some have common soil, some have sandy soil, and that kind of like the plants grow depending on that soil. So the topography becomes very different.
Not really, I would say, because same thing is present everywhere. Like if you look at the landscape within India itself, you will find different variety. Same is the case with probably if you go to the southern American part, you will also have the same similar time. One region will be marshy, one region will be like kind of a little deserted, one region will be having different kinds of soils and so on. So that is what is referring to the similar topography. It's not that all the continents, they have exactly same climate or exactly same topography. No, there is some correlation. That's what
So,
that's
but
what
he's
means.
talk like okay, there are two different continents and both might have desert and hills, but he's talking about two different islands. So and he's saying that the climate and topography of the islands is similar. So one won't be a mountain and one won't be a marsh. Both will be a plain or both will be an iceland, right?
Yeah, in that case, yes, for sure, it will be like drastically different.
What will be drastically different, sir?
The flora and fauna that is growing in those cases,
In which cases? Like, okay,
where
the different topography,
it
right?
is mountain and if it is plain land,
Yes, sir.
those
But
cases.
like in the island, since like they said that the climate and the topography is similar, so they should have similar flora and fauna, right? I mean, like what exactly is the change that will make it different?
I'm not too sure of it. See, the like what I could think of in terms of understanding this particular statement is like even though there are different islands which were closer together and now they are widely separated, and if at all they have same climate and topography, they can have a different flora and fauna.
So this contradicts Darwin's theory itself.
Why?
Uh, so because let's say there are two different islands, and like both of them have different flora and fauna,
Hmm.
and both of them have a different climate. So then, okay, you can make a hypothesis that because of the different climate and different topography, the species adapted differently and became different, even though they were the same before, right? So they were the same before, but they adapted to the different climates and became different.
No,
But
your assumption is going in the direction that let's say you have two islands, similar climatic conditions, and one species is left on both the islands, like same species on both the islands. You are expecting both the species, if they evolve independently, they should evolve into the similar species.
no. I'm saying that no, the first case is different. Like yeah, the second case is what I'm saying. No. So see, this case contradicts the original theory because if there are two different, like if there's one island which split into two, it had the same species, but it split into two and went to different climate zones maybe. So now it has a different climate and maybe a different topography. And so because of adaptation, uh, because of adaptation, the species will grow differently. But if this is true, then then you can't, like this is like a control. You can't say that the species grew differently because of the climate, because you can say that no, now the two islands, they have the same island, but still the species grew differently. So you can say that the species growing differently doesn't depend on whether you get what I'm saying, the climate is different or not. Because in both cases, so you get it, it's like a control.
I,
So
I
if
got it.
we
So
want to prove Darwin's theory, we can say we split one island into two separately, independently, but they both have the same climate and topography, and there was not much observable change between the flora and fauna. Then you could prove it through a control. But this is the opposite, sir.
so that is exactly one of the drawback of the Darwinism, which we'll see in the terms of, I guess, where is it? Criticism of Darwinism. So this inheritance of the small variations and stuff, it is not able to explain. So this Darwin's, what we are talking of currently. So what we are looking at, it is in the terms of what Darwin proposed in his theory based on his observation. We are discussing at a level which is beyond Darwinism, which we will go to the neo-Darwinism. So within that Darwin's theory, this particular fact that you mentioned, why that differences in the species, even being present on the similar climatic conditions or so on one particular planet, right? That Darwin has failed to explain that particular aspect, and that is what led to the next level of this theory, which we call as neo-Darwinism, which ultimately takes care into the genetic variations and stuff like that, and that led to those differences. So that explains, like even being on this Galapagos island, why there were these 13 species developed, same situation, same island and everything same, still the differences were
Okay.
observed.
So Darwin didn't really give a theory. He gave his observations, but like you can see like some of the observations they contradict. Like it doesn't make any sense if you assume that all of them are true.
No, see, Pratham, your brain might be working faster than Darwin. What Darwin thought, he put it here.
No. I'm saying that. So okay, these were his observations, but he didn't really make it into a theory because a theory has to have.
Pictures are here. We'll see them.
Okay.
These are the pointers that he mentioned of specifically. And again, they may or may not make like much sense to some, but yes, this is what he had given at that time. Okay, so let's look at this and then we will come back to this point. So yeah, and then he also collected some fossils and noticed that some fossils, they resemble the modern day plants and animals, and the others were much different and they were more like primitive ones. So that is like just his observation that he put on the paper, and based on that, these salient features or these characteristics or what we call as postulates or hypothesized pointers. So first one was overproduction or rapid multiplication. Now, all the living beings, they have inherent tendency to produce offspring in large numbers, and that is specifically to continue the race. And this was called as prodigality. And all the living organisms, they have tendency for geometric increase. Geometric increase as in that exponential increase kind of thing. So that was one hypothesis that he had given. Now, how does he explain that natural selection or survival of the fittest comes into this other point? So,
but is this point true with every species? Because like there are some species which have a very less rate of giving birth, right? So it's more linear in them.
But that is what is the part of adaptation later on, right? That's what we talk of. Like some species, they give birth to many. Some species, they give birth to like human and fish. If we compare, fish can lay eggs in, I don't know, hundreds or thousands at times. Human give birth once in a year kind of thing. So that way it's drastically different. And fish can lay the same egg probably even daily or like alternate days or whatsoever. So that's like a huge difference. So that is what he's explaining in terms of overproduction or rapid multiplication.
So okay, so what he means is not all living beings, only the ones who have adapted more. So it's in direct proportion with the adaptation in that aspect.
He is not mentioning of any of that fact. He is just simply mentioning that it is inherent tendency of an organism to reproduce. That's it.
Okay. But it doesn't have to be geometrical, like in all species. That depends on the adaptation.
If it is more or less,
like yeah, like elephants, they rarely give birth, right?
yeah, but that is what we know now. Darwin may not have observed elephants by then. Whatever species he had observed, whatever observations he had got by then, he concluded on that basis. It was not including all the other species.
Okay. So this was more like an observation and not like a wide scale theory.
Rather, it was more like a hypothesis he gave based on those observations.
Okay.
And like that's why, like if you look at the sequence of these features, we'll come to know how he came to that conclusion of survival of the fittest or natural selection. Now, knowing that organisms number is increasing by the process of reproduction, at the same time there is limited space and food. Limited space as if there is nothing more than this earth space, and in terms of food also, whatever is growing is also limited, and that is constant. So ultimate space and the food in the universe is constant. So in spite of the reproductive potential of the species, that means their numbers, even though they are increasing, the numbers, they are under natural conditions remains fairly constant, because let's say within a specific territory there will be limited food. So based on that limited food and limited space, the numbers cannot grow higher. And that's when he thought it's a natural selection procedure. So the numbers remain constant due to the limited amount of space and the food present on that particular space. If we talk of an island, this becomes more obviously, let's say an island can accommodate 1 lakh or 1 million of all the organisms, right? But if it grows beyond that 1 lakh, there will be ultimately that number, even though it's increasing at some time point, there will be a cap, upper cap, that it cannot grow beyond it because the food would have diminished by then. So that's what he's talking of. And that's when he came to the next feature, that is struggle for existence. And it can be intraspecific or what is also called as intranasine. Intraspecific, that means within the organism itself. Interspecific, that is in between the organism. And the struggle with the environment. Struggle with the environment, again, for there can be natural calamities like flood, storm, heat, cold, lightning, and so on. Any of these natural calamities, which leads to this number being constant. And you can experience it now also if we apply this particular feature or this particular concept of struggle for existence nowadays. You know that the population is increasing. It is one of the reason of creating more and more food, which is ultimately causing global warming. Not just food, there are several other factors. Global warming is happening and it is leading to different situations which are leading to the natural calamities. So that's ultimately keeping a cap. Even this corona, if we can think of in this particular manner, it would fit into that particular hypothesis. So that way, what he wanted to mention is there is always a struggle for existence. So even in the second point, if we think, if there is limited food, obviously there will be struggle for fighting for that food. Whosoever is the stronger will win in terms of that adaptable situation. So these were the 3 points. And the fourth one, that is variations. No two individuals, they are identical except the monozygotic twins. That was his observation. And variations may prove to be either harmful, what we call as selective disadvantage, or it can be useful, which what we call as selective advantage. There were specific examples of this, which I forgot in terms of, I guess, no, I missed it totally. I don't remember. Yeah.
Sir, this point, is it what he said or is it true?
Variation?
Yeah, like it can be harmful or useful, because I watched a video and it said that it can only be useful.
Certain variations like mutations, what we know of, they are harmful also, right? Like some
like mutations, as in if someone like shoots an X-ray or a gamma ray at you, so yeah, that way. But like mutations that occur naturally, like like in the form of adaptation, those like more the ones that are more common.
No, then surely they are obviously always useful.
Okay. So this is what he thought.
Yeah, this is what he had put it to these 3 categories: harmful, useful, and neutral. That means it's neither affecting or neither being useful. So these were the features that he thought they are like proving this whole point of evolution and how the organisms survive on this earth. Then this next point of natural selection and the survival of the fittest. This is the one of the major points within whole theory of Darwinism. So nature selects or favors only those individuals which have more favorable variations. Again, one of the common misconception that we have in terms of survival of the fittest is that we think one who is stronger wins the race or stays or survives, right? So that stronger is not physically stronger. It's stronger in terms of what kind of adaptation that particular organism has achieved to be favorable in that particular situation. That's what that fittest terminology referred. So that way the nature will always favor the organisms or individuals with the more favorable variations, and then those which are best adapted to their environment. So the individuals with more favorable variations will survive, will reproduce offsprings, and others will fail to do so. And this is what he has termed as differential reproduction. So other fails to do so does not literally mean they won't be reproducing, but even if they reproduce, they will reproduce weak offsprings, which may not be adaptable or suitable or like adapting to their environment, and that's what is the failure to do so. And this was termed as differential reproduction. Then inheritance of the useful variation. Now again, there are so many gaps you will realize in this particular thing. So in this point, inheritance of the useful variation. So the individuals which survive the struggle for existence will transmit their useful variation to the offspring, which will also prove to be fit. But then how exactly they are adapting, what exactly is happening while the specific adaptable inheritance is going to the offspring, that was not explained by Darwin. And also in terms of origin of new species, his hypothesis was the new variation occur in every generation. There will be certain changes in every generation and supplement the favorable variation inherited from the parents. And that way, all the variations which are favorable, they keep on accumulating over the generations. And after a certain generation time, like let's say maybe 100 or 200 or whatsoever that number is of the generations, that particular species will become like drastically different from the existing, and that's what leads to a new species. That was his hypothesis. And so the origin of new species by gradual modification of the older species is called as speciation. So that's what he had hypothesized in terms of different points under the theory of natural selection. Now, you can obviously see a clear-cut, what we say, disadvantage of this theory. It is not explaining how exactly it is happening. What is happening, the theory is explaining it very well, probably, because to the best, natural selection is still applicable in quite a lot of context, right? But how exactly, even the origin of new species, how is it happening? The inheritance of those specific adaptable characters, how is it happening? That is not being explained, and that's what becomes the criticism of Darwinism. So there is this theory of pangenesis, which was proposed by him again in the later time point, to explain quite a few phenomena of this, especially the mechanism of inheritance, or what we call as how the variations are being transferred from one generation to the next. So according to this theory, every cell or organ or part of the body produces a minute hereditary particle. Now you can again imagine that his assumption is there is something called as hereditary particle which is present within a cell, and he had named them pangenes or gamules. I guess this we have heard this terminology earlier while we are looking at that inheritance chapter. So these gamules, they are carried by the blood and then they are deposited in gametes. And that's how when the gametes, they go and fuse with the other like gender's gamete, that's when they will be carried to the next generation. So that was his assumption in the case of theory of pangenesis. What we currently call them as genes, but means earlier by then Darwin had labeled them as gamules and so on, which is present. But his assumption that they are carried by blood and then deposited in gamete, that was surely not so true. And then there was another theory which was proposed by this wise man. It is called as germ plasm theory. So germ plasm is something but that something like during the embryonic development, we know the germ layers are formed. That whole thing is called as germ plasm. So that germ plasm gets differentiated from the somatoplasm. Somatoplasm is the regular cells of the body early in the embryonic development. So according to this germ plasm theory, these cells or this germ plasm, they get differentiated from the regular cells of the body or somatoplasm in the early stage of development itself, ruling out any influence of somatic changes on the germ cells. So whatever changes in the somatic cells happens, that are not affecting the germ cells. So whatever changes have happened in the embryonic development, that's it. Later on, there is no effect of somatic cells on the germ cells, which is again in a way true what we know of. Like let's say if I have a liver cancer, the next generation not necessarily will have liver cancer until and unless it's a genetic reason in the germ cells. Otherwise, if it is just a disorder with me, it will not be passed on to the next generation. That's what this theory also says. So but if you look at this Darwin's theory later on, which was the criticism of his original idea of theory of natural selection, he proposed another theory in terms of theory of pangenesis. And the second point in terms of criticism of this Darwinism is with respect to inheritance of small variations. Now again, so there were like little changes which were happening throughout the generations in different species. So that's what is small variations. So these small variations, they form the raw material for evolution, and the occurrence of these variations can be useful only when they are fully developed or functional. What this means is, like let's say if we think of a bird has grown from a reptile, or either ways any organism, or let's say bird is evolved from some smaller organism, and their wing structure, they have started growing slowly, right? Now if they are growing slowly, that means earlier they had smaller wings which became more and more adaptable, and then they become actually the wings with which the birds can fly. But then what is the use of that small wings when the at the initial stages? That was not explained by Darwin. And also, how can the inheritance of such organs at initial stage, that was also not that how does that happen, that was also not explained by this Darwinism's theory.
So, but doesn't it kind of explain it? Because like I watched this video and they said that naturally when you evolve or when anything evolves, the adaptations or the variations that it gets, it has to be useful. It cannot be negative.
No,
And they drew this diagram like that, like I mean they didn't draw this diagram, it was like a 3D map. So they're saying that like through that they can also calculate the potential of evolving in every species. So you can only go higher from that map. So like, and the dinosaurs ka thing, when they evolved into birds, the small ones that evolved into birds, they climbed trees and they tried to glide. So they jump from trees to trees, and like first the wings didn't grow because of wings, they wanted to glide. So every time the skin like it stretched a bit, like it grew a bit more, like the wingspan, like it was helpful in gliding. So they actually got better with each stage because they got better at gliding, and some point of time it turned into wings. So at every stage it was better than the previous one.
No, that is correct, but that's
So
why
doesn't natural selection say so? Like it was written, how are these structures favored by natural selection? So if I have a bit longer, like gliders than someone else, then I can glide more, right? To one tree from the next, from one tree to the next.
do you think even that hopping from plant to plant or tree to tree, that would have developed in like what, how many number of generations? Let's say if we say these changes were happening across 100 generations after, but
Those
what,
are much more, like much more.
no,
It happened millions of years. Yeah, yeah.
we say,
Like,
but
let's
then
just say.
what was happening in terms of those 100 or 1000 generation over the time? So those are the small variations, right?
Yes, but they were useful, right?
They were useful when they were fully developed or functional.
No, that's what. So it like birds in like feathers in birds' wings, they weren't even meant to be developed, right? They were just byproducts for the gliders that developed because they were gliding.
No, but again, when you go to that higher stage of having feathers or wings, that is still a completely developed. There is always in every generation, there were these small variations which were happening, which after a certain generation led to a development of feather or wings,
So yes, sir.
right?
But
So
these small ones were also useful, right?
that is useful when it is fully functional. That's what Darwinism is saying, or that was one of the drawback of this Darwinism. It did not explain what is the how is this small changes they are getting transferred from one generation to other, where after a specific generation then only you see, oh, these were the changes which would have happened in the earlier generation. Now a bird has wings or has a feather or something like that, you see. So that way the small variations, why and how they are getting transmitted from one generation to the other, that was not explained.
So, but this is another point, right?
No,
uh, how are these structures that were not fully evolved favored by natural selection? So can't natural selection say that because they help them glide better? So even the intermediate
but again you are jumping to the stage where it is fully developed. What is this point speaking of is, before the stage is it is reaching to the fully developed or fully functional stage, whatever are those changes, how are they getting transmitted and why only those specific changes?
so how are they getting transmitted, or like but
How are they getting transmitted and why are they getting transmitted, only those specific? Why not something else was developed simultaneously as a part of natural selection or so on? That part is not explained by Darwinism.
okay, so like this point, uh, when we are saying that Darwinism did not explain that, it's what? So it's how, like the genetic wise, so how they were passed down, or is this point something else?
Which point are you referring to? The
So
second?
the one that's on the slide, the top one, like the one we are discussing.
Yeah, that I didn't get the question. Like, what am I supposed to say or answer?
No. So like these guys, like why don't they agree with Darwin, like natural selection in this point?
It's not about someone not agreeing. It's very clear and apparent because Darwin's theory did not mention of how these small variations are getting transmitted.
So, but that point we already covered, right? This is
Where
the previous one. Like, isn't this a different point, or is that only?
in the salient features, it doesn't mention of the small changes and how does it happen. It
Okay.
mentions of the small variation in this origin of new species. It talks of certain variations they getting accumulated over a few generations and then it becomes a new species. But then why only those new small variations they are getting transferred in every generation? How does that transmittance occur? Though he had mentioned later in terms of gametes, but that came in much later. That was not part of the Darwin's theory, right? So this variation was because of these like certain changes that happens because of the hereditary particles that came in much later.
So, but like, was Darwin even alive in 1968?
I am not sure.
So he died much earlier, right?
No, I guess 19. He was surely present at this time.
Yeah, he was in the
Wait,
early 20th century,
this
right?
is 1868, huh? My bad. This is 1868.
Okay,
That's,
so
that's,
they're
that's
saying about the transmission of genes, like DNA.
yeah. This is clearly a mistake. That's, I always have this habit of typing everywhere 19th. So that's coming from there. Let me see, where is it? I have taken it from somewhere. Yeah, it's 1868, clearly. It's my bad. Oh, that's when you are asked that question.
No. This I just noticed. This
No,
possibility.
but then I hope this point is clear in terms of
Yes, sir. So
why
this
the,
is only about transmission, like
yeah.
DNA stuff.
And also always remember, like what I mean, again, it's going back and forth, but we tend to use the current knowledge to apply it to those theories. But at that particular time point, which was 100 years back, uh, those people, they may not have thought, because they did not know of genes, they did not know of quite many things. They did not know how the hereditary structures they are working, how it is getting transmitted. So that's why whatever their assumptions, they had a limited knowledge. Now in terms of what we consider ourselves, is we have quite a lot of knowledge compared to that era. So that's where these differences will be there. Yeah, so that is this theory of that is this inheritance of small variation, which was not explained by this fellow Darwin. Also the existence of vestigial organ. Now again, coming to the same point we spoke of, natural selection mentions mostly the useful organs, but then why the existence of vestigial organs was not explained by the Darwin's theory. And again, this is in sync with certain pointers from this inheritance of small variation. Over the time, variation also occurs in that selective, uh, like degrading way, that structure is going away from the particular organism. So that's what is vestigial organs. Also, Darwin's theory could not explain the over specialization of certain structures, like for example, antlers of a deer or tusk of an elephant. These ultimately can be a problematic structures. These are not always useful structure. Like if you think in terms of having horns like structure on your head, and then you are moving from place to place, it's quite, it can be messy at times, or it is not always useful. Same is the case with tusk of an elephant. What is the function, or what is the use, that was not identified or not explained by the Darwinism principle. Also, Darwin explained the survival of the fittest, that this is how it happens, but it did not explain the arrival of the fittest. How does that happen? Again, goes back to the same point in terms of how is that natural selection process happening at the cellular or at an organism's level. It explains certain features get transferred from one species to other, but what is in between? The mechanism of occurrence of variations. How does that variation occurs in that particular species, and how does it get inherited? That was not explained, and that is what came into this next theory of neo-Darwinism. So 26. Okay, let me just go over these pointers, and then we will explain in detail in the next class about all these pointers. So this theory was actually study the effect of studies of many scientists, which
Okay,
are
so like I had a question. Like there was, are we supposed to study the De Vries theory also, or is that not in the syllabus?
that will come a little, like now we'll just speak of it in a brief, because here we talk where is that point of mutation. Somewhere here in either of these points we will talk of that mutation things. So there we will get to know. Again, that theory is not part of the syllabus, that's why I have kind of skipped it earlier, but we'll
Okay.
speak of it in pointers a little later. So this is like a kind of reconciliations of Darwin's theory of natural selection. You see some of the pointers from that theory is still being utilized in neo-Darwinism. So that's why the name is not completely changed. and then this De Vries theory of mutation, and again the addition of this Stebbins fellow, and then it was written in a book called Process of Organic Evolution. Again, I guess this book is also available online if you Google it. So this was the work of these many people, and that was also called as modern synthetic theory of evolution. So according to this theory, Neo-Darwinism, the origin of species is the base of interaction of genetic variation. One of the most important factor which Darwin could not identify. And of course, by then, if you look at the number of years that these people were studying, this is like relatively very recent. By then, the genetic establishment of the all the different organisms was already done, right? Especially if you look at the Stebbins period, which is 1966 to 76, very recent, like 40-50 years back, rather 60 years back or so. So during that particular period, there was quite a lot of establishment in terms of genetic studies had happened, and that's when this theory was able to exactly pinpoint how is this origin of species is happening, which is because of the interaction of the genetic variation and the natural selection, of course. And it happens due to quite many factors, what is called as genetic variability or variation in the gene pool of the population. Like, you know, now within human organisms itself, there is a drastic difference in terms of gene pool, or what you call as genetic mapping, right? Or isolation of different populations of a species. That was one more important aspect of this variation. Natural selection, of course, taken as it is from the Darwinism. Genetic basis of the adaptation, how are the adaptations happening, and what is the criteria for that happening, in terms of whether they are changing genetically or are they cellular changes due to the genetic effects or genetic changes. So all of that is explained in this theory, and also the speciation or the origin of these different species, that is also being explained in the Neo-Darwinism. So we'll have a look at these points in a little elaborate way. Natural selection, again, we may not look at as such, but we'll see these points in the next class. So let me stop here. Do you people have any question?